What up, TCK Potters? I'm your host, Sky Guasco, back with you with another episode of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, aka TCK Pod, joined by my man, Bobby Lamarco, aka Fantasy Football X Factor. Tonight, this is episode 373. We are breaking down the NFC Free Agency recap. Joined once again by our man, Joe Volpe, aka Fantasy Football Analyst. We'll bring him in just a second, but Bobby, I want to kind of just we did have a couple AFC moves after last episode. Last episode with Joe, we broke down the entire AFC, and of course, per podcast, a couple moves broke. We're going to get through those in just a second. But did is there one particular thing that you took away from last episode when we broke down the entire conference of the AFC that we can look forward to with this one as we break down the NFC?
I think it's just highlighting some of the guys that go to places where they can flourish. I think that's one of the things that I want to look at. Overcrowding is never always a good thing, like the Houston Texans, and kind of looking at some of the NFC teams where some of the moves might leave you with your head scratching. But there was a couple things we'll talk about in a second that happened that will, with the AFC piece. But overall, for the NFC, Kenny Golladay going to the Giants, I'm already happy. We could just do the whole episode on that, and I'm good to
go. My man, absolutely ecstatic. You are a Giants fan. I'm a 49er fan. We gave Joe his piece with the Patriots last episode, so we're going to rock some AFC or some NFC. We did AFC last episode on 372. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. You can follow me at Sky Guasco, my name, pretty simple there. Bobby Lamarco at FFX Factor on Instagram, fantasy football _TCK Pod, on TikTok at TCK Pod, and on the Facebook group as well. Per usual, we're streaming live. Feel free, if you're jumping into YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, or Facebook, you can jump into our comment section and we will get to as much of the commentary as possible. But without any further ado, we do have a lot to cover. So let's bring in our guest for the evening. Once again, my man, Joe Volpe, aka Fantasy Football Analyst. Joe,
what's up?
It's really great to have you back, brother. How are you?
Yeah, good. It's been an eventful 2 days for the AFC. For the NFC, it's been awesome for their offseason. You mentioned Kenny Golladay, so I'm excited to get into some of these guys. I feel like there's a lot more names in the NFC than the AFC, so this should be a fun episode.
It's super interesting, and we're gonna double up on 4 or 5 extra names in the AFC that came in today and yesterday we didn't cover on Tuesday. But what's actually funny about this is there's actually 40 names exactly on the 2 spreadsheets that we're sharing. So if you go back and check it out, there's 40 on the AFC, 40 on the NFC with the original sheet. A couple of guys have been added and stuff since then, but it actually is pretty awesome. Similar. But I'm with you. There's a lot going on. All right, Joe, we appreciate you coming back on. Again, Bobby and I sang your praises last episode. We won't spend too much time on that again this time, but he and I have been following
go ahead.
We've been following your content for quite a long time, a handful of years. You just celebrated your 4th season with your page. You're up over 47,000 or so followers on Instagram. So once again, TCK Potters, make sure to go give Joe some extra love and a follow on IG at fantasy.football.analyst. Make sure you have those periods in there. Okay, boys, before we get in this here, we do have a lot in the NFC, but we do want to recap just a couple extra names additional to our conversation from Tuesday. Tonight here, let's jump into a couple AFC additions. We're going to start with T.Y. Hilton, 31 years old, formerly of the Colts, stays with the Colts, re-signs for 1 year, $8 million. A lot of people thought he was going to leave town. I personally did as well, but they do bring him back. 1 year, $8 million. Demarcus Robinson, I think kind of a sleepy, unsung hero overall for the Chiefs over the years. 26 years old, re-signs with the Chiefs as well. 1 year, just over $1 million deal there. And then Tevin Coleman, was supposed to break out and be amazing in Atlanta. Didn't really get the opportunity when Devonta Freeman left. He goes to San Francisco. He gets beat up. He ends up slowing way down. He gets passed up by about 4 guys on the depth chart. Tevin Coleman signs with a 1 year deal, $2 million with the Jets. We have a couple other lower tier names, but let's start here. T.Y. Hilton back with the Colts. Demarcus Robinson back with the Chiefs. And Tevin Coleman ships across the country over to the New York Football Jets. Now, it kind of makes sense because he does have his former offensive coordinator. He does have his head coach, defensive coordinator, now head coach. So he has some 49er ties, but kind of a puzzling call if the Jets are really trying to turn the page, because Tevin Coleman's on the wrong side of just 27, but isn't looking very explosive these days.
Yeah, Joe, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so in terms of Tevin Coleman, I think this is the right move if you're going to make a good move for a running back in the draft. So if your focus is the draft, I think Tevin Coleman's a perfect backup bridge type guy to have a rookie go with him. Good depth, I would say, someone who's familiar with the system, and that's exactly what they want there. So football move, I like it. If they don't draft a running back and their plan is just Tevin Coleman, then obviously there's a lot to hate. I guess it's better than the situation of just having LaMichael Perine, I guess. I always mess up that last name. Perine, Samaje, they all get me. But between Perine and what's the other guy? Ty Johnson. So Frank Gore, obviously not staying there. But there's no word on if he's retired yet, so that's going to be interesting as well. So Tevin Coleman, as of right now, the de facto guy in New York, but I'm expecting that to change with the draft.
Yeah, and I'm with the whole Tevin Coleman thing, sometimes bringing that veteran who's been in this kind of system dating back to Kyle Shanahan's days in Atlanta, so I get it. But it's just like I want to have fun. I want like some Philip Lindsay spice there, like good young back, good, but I don't get what I want all the time. So it's all right. T.Y. Hilton to me is, maybe Carson Wentz brings the curse and he gets hurt again because Carson Wentz's weapons always get hurt. But his weapons between T.Y. Hilton and with Michael Pittman are probably a better duo than he's had the last couple seasons in Philly because of all the injuries in Philly. So I do like the move because he is a nice complement to a guy like Michael Pittman, a big physical receiver. And then you got T.Y. Hilton take the top off and then Paris Campbell in the slot. So I do like the move for Carson Wentz in that offense. Can he just stay healthy? Can he play, 14 games minimum because if he goes down, you're going back to Zach Pascal and players like that. For Demarcus Robinson, this is interesting to me because there's no Sammy Watkins. Now, Watkins, there's a lot of noise going on that he might leave and go, but he could re-sign too. We don't know that yet. It's possible. But if he does leave, that number 2 wide receiver battle, because Demarcus Robinson has the trust of the coaching staff. Mecole Hardman's got the talent, but he doesn't seem consistent. They don't play him enough, right? So Demarcus Robinson could fall into that wide receiver 2 role led by Patrick Mahomes. So if you combine, most of Sammy Watkins' targets and throw it over to Demarcus Robinson's, now you're talking maybe a low-end wide receiver 3, maybe like a wide receiver 4 in fantasy. So I think there is something there. But Mecole Hardman and him, that wide receiver 2 battle is going to be pretty important.
I think Demarcus Robinson could absolutely be a sleeper dark horse pick. Forgot about in fantasy and dynasty, only 26 years old, but also in redraft, because you're right, Bobby. And look, the reality is, even as a 3rd, 4th, 5th option in that offense over the last 2 years, he has random weeks where he has like 8 end zone targets because Tyreek and Kelsey are getting triple teamed in the end zone. Demarcus Robinson's that next guy, and he gets opportunities already. You're opening it up now, and we're able to see that. So keep an eye on Demarcus Robinson. A couple of the names here. These aren't sexy names, but quickly just mentioning Matt Breida, still just 26. He feels much older than that, but 26 years old, started with the 49ers, goes to the Dolphins, 1-year deal with the Buffalo Bills, who already have 2 young running backs. That's interesting. And Tywan Jones and C.J. Beathard to Buffalo and Jacksonville. Not necessarily need to cover those guys, but Matt Breida heading to Buffalo. Zach Moss, promising rookie, came in last year, didn't really catch his feet, got injured. Singletary came off of a nice rookie season himself, but his second-year campaign didn't really have the burst of the big plays. We know that Josh Allen is kind of the goal line back already there, and now they have Stephon Diggs as well, and John Brown, who they just had it in the offseason as well. So how do we feel about Matt Breida, if at all, and maybe this backfield in general in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think Buffalo at this point just wants something to click. They just need a consistent running game, whether it's Singletary, whether it's Matt Breida taking on a bigger role, whether it's Zach Moss. They just want something to click at this point. And I think drafting another running back, if they're not going to spend that first rounder, which they really shouldn't, if they draft another running back in the 2nd or 3rd round, you might just get the same result you got the last 2 years of drafting running back in the 2nd or 3rd round. So, for them, I guess it makes sense to add a veteran who's had flashes in the NFL. If Matt Breida ends up being the guy, I don't think they really care. I think they just want a running game in this offense. So I'm not someone I'm really interested in for fantasy. And, the Buffalo duo was starting to look not so hot for fantasy either. So I guess it helps to, maybe it'll drop their ADPs a little bit, allow you to take that chance on Zach Moss in the 7th or 8th round, as opposed to 6th or 7th. And then Singletary, as we know, probably not someone we're looking at.
Bobby, which of these backs would you be interested, if at all, come draft time? Whether it's ADP, they're all going to be late rounders, whatever. Are you going to target any one of these backs in Buffalo?
No. Just not to get too detailed, it's just the fact that this offense has proven time again they can go 4 wide and they can just air it out with Josh Allen. They don't get targets in the backfield. That's my biggest problem. So when you have that many weapons, receivers in the passing game, and they're not funneling targets, and Josh Allen takes off when he needs to, and he's not checking it down, I'm not interested in a back that's going to get 10 to 12 carries and barely any passing attempts, and then who gets the goal line work is Zach Moss. No, thank you. I think there's going to be better options based on ADP. In that range, typically you can get better wide receivers.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yep.
All right, boys, quick AFC recap there. Again, we have a full AFC breakdown. Everybody else on the previous episode 372 that we released on Tuesday, you can go and get the rest of the AFC breakdown if you have not gotten that already. We just wanted to kind of catch up with what happened Wednesday and Thursday morning before the show. All right, boys, time to jump into the NFC. Let's start with my boy, A.J. Green, 32 years old now, marred by injuries the last couple of seasons, a 1-year deal, $6 million with the Arizona Cardinals. Larry Fitzgerald still at large. There's conversations he could end up in a number of places, maybe Tampa Bay, maybe Minnesota, where let's not forget he started as a ball boy actually for those Randy Moss teams. So he might be just wanting to kind of go back there for sentimental value before he exits the NFL. Mike Davis gets picked up by the Atlanta Falcons, 2 years, $5.5 million. All of us were excited to get a running back in free agency to Atlanta. Not sure Mike Davis was at the top of people's list. How do we feel about A.J. Green? We'll keep Larry Fitz out of it for now. A.J. Green and Mike Davis.
So A.J. Green's kind of interesting. At this point in career, he doesn't seem like he's nearly the same guy he was when he was considered a top 5 receiver in the league. Being 32 years old now, I think Christian Kirk is still going to be the second wide receiver in this offense. I think A.J. Green is going to have his moments because of the coverage that he'll be seeing with DeAndre Hopkins on the other side. And, at the very least, if A.J. Green does require additional help from the secondary, and if he does draw a little more coverage, then maybe it could be good for DeAndre Hopkins, because the way they use Hopkins in year 1 in Arizona was just not great. He should have been way better than he was last year. So hoping A.J. Green can help that a little bit. I still think Christian Kirk is going to be the better fantasy option than Green, but Mike Davis, again, not the guy we imagined going to Atlanta, but with the money they had, it's what made the most sense for them. And this also, kind of like the Tevin Coleman move, gives them an opportunity to draft a running back early at the beginning of that 2nd round. That's a good spot to get a guy like Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, if he's there, Najee Harris. I doubt he'll make it that far, but if he does, it's a great spot to pick him. So I'm sure it'll end up being a good spot with Arthur Smith as that head coach now.
Yeah, I think with Mike Davis, it's really all about the draft. It sounds great, but until the draft happens, I honestly have no reaction yet, because if they draft a day 2 running, change a lot of things. But Mike Davis has shown that he can be competent. I mean, he showed it last year with the Carolina Panthers. He's good in the passing game. He's trusted on 3rd downs. He can do pass pro, and he's actually good between the tackles. So he is kind of an all-around back. So if it does, for whatever reason, they decide, okay, we're going to go with Mike Davis this year, you better take notice. So he's going to probably be a 4th-round pick in that range, and I'm interested because I like Mike Davis. As for A.J. Green, Larry Fitzgerald is kind of vacating 5.5 targets a game. So that's something. I mean, he'll flirt with about 90 targets or so next year in this kind of offense. The question is he actually done? I mean, Joe Burrow, him coming back and Joe Burrow early on, they were force-feeding A.J. Green. It really wasn't working. Then they started using T. Higgins more, and A.J. Green kind of fell off. But Joe Burrow, so was A.J. Green going to get his legs under him? We don't really know what he looks like with a competent quarterback when he finally got back into the swing of things. So a speculative, last-round pick, sure, why not? I mean, this offense should take another step with continuity. Love it. But another year with DeAndre Hopkins taking away getting all the defensive attention, I think, you could do worse for a last-round pick if it's just, 1 or 2 weeks. If he doesn't do anything, you just dump him.
I totally agree. And hopefully for AJ Green's sake, he can stay healthy and we can kind of get some resemblance of the good old days. And you said it, Joe Burrow was peppering AJ Green early and they just couldn't get on the same page. So hopefully he can bounce back in what should be a high-powered offense. Okay, boys, two names here that aren't very fancy, but I just wanted to mention them really quick. If you have any comments, great. If not, we'll move on. David Moore, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks, 2-year deal, almost $5 million. That's why I want to bring this up. The Atlanta Falcons spent about $5 million on David Moore, who was the third, fourth string receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. And then Dan Arnold, formerly of the Saints, and then with the Cardinals last year, gets picked up by Carolina. Ian Thomas didn't do anything last year. Was it Ian Thomas or was it the scheme interested there? $2 million or 2-year, $6 million deal there. So David Moore, Dan Arnold, again, not really on your radar, but a comment from either one of you, or we can move on.
I mean, I got comments. All right. The Panthers are vacating like 200 targets. So there's room, and not everything's going to go to DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Curtis Samuel by himself is vacating 97 targets, and that's with Robbie Anderson and with DJ Moore being on the team. So I think there is something there for a guy like David Moore. The real question to me is, what does it do to the offense for DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson? Who actually plays in the slot? Because Curtis Samuel was the primary slot guy. David Moore is not a primary slot guy. So does that mean DJ Moore is going to play more in the slot? I like that because that puts him against nickel corners. So that stuff does interest me for the other players. As for Dan Arnold, it is something to note that he was on the 2018 Saints with Joe Brady. So Brady was on that Saints coaching staff when Dan Arnold was there. So they liked him enough to say, he vouched for him and say, hey, I think this guy could do something for us. Let's bring him over. And like you just touched on, Ian Thomas did absolutely nothing last year as a pass catcher. So maybe Dan Arnold does take over that pass catching role in that offense because of his ties to Joe Brady.
And go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add on. Bobby basically hit just about every point we could with these two guys. But yeah, I mean, Dan Arnold did have his moments last year. I remember the one game he had that like 60-yard touchdown. It was like to start off the game, which was huge for anyone who started them in DFS that week. That was me. But that was just luck, by the way. Complete luck.
Humble brag.
One of my 18
last. Beyond, bro. Straight facts. That's all we need.
I still didn't win any money, but one of my 18 lineups, so that was nice. But yeah, I mean, Dan Arnold, definitely a later round name to keep an eye on if they don't add any wide receivers early in the draft or early enough to deter us, or any tight ends early, because that's an option. The Panthers do pick early-ish. I think they pick 8th in the second round. So that's a spot where they could take up Brevin Jordan or Pat Freiermuth or someone like that. So we'll have to see.
And with Ian Thomas not necessarily and look, I mean, maybe Ian Thomas is fine and they didn't use him. Nonetheless, they have nice wide receivers, but when you get in the red zone, if you're not going to Christian McCaffrey, which they will on first, second, and third down, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are not big body box out targets in the red zone. They're just not. They're different receivers. So Dan Arnold minimum could potentially be that body. Okay, boys, we got a handful from the Chicago Bears. We would love to get Dweez in on this eventually as our house Bears fan. Andy Dalton, my man. Andy Dalton, probably the starter here. 33 years old, 1-year, $10 million deal to pick up the slack for Trubisky in Chicago. Allen Robinson franchise tag. We've talked about that quite at length on the podcast, but feel free to mention that. Damian Williams. This is interesting here. Signs a 1-year deal with Chicago. David Montgomery was absolutely fantastic down the stretch last year. Played probably the worst rushing defenses that Derrick Henry didn't play. Nonetheless, he did what he needed to do. He got it done, and he helped people win fantasy championships, and that's really all people like us remember. But he's a good young back. Tariq Cohen is coming back as well. Let's not forget, Damian Williams, in my opinion, against my Niners, should have won the Super Bowl MVP 2 years ago. It goes to the quarterback every time. Mahomes is Mahomes. C'est la vie. However, Damian Williams had an incredible game, opted out last season. His mom has stage 4 cancer and things and didn't want to get her sick. And then he ends up getting ousted by the team, and he goes to Chicago. So interesting here. Andy Dalton, Allen Robinson, and Damian Williams for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, so Andy Dalton, they're calling him QB1. It seems like they have.
How
full
about, was that a
confidence.
team tweet? Did you see
That
that?
was a team tweet. Yes.
Did you see Matt Berry right underneath that? That was like, this is definitely not a fantasy tweet then, right? And that was his comment. It's just like, that's right.
Definitely not a fantasy tweet, but yeah. It seems like they're committing to Dalton. And I look, when you're the Bears, right? You're picking 20th or so in the draft. You're not in a position to get one of the top name quarterbacks. So unless you're going to make a huge trade up into that top 10 or take like a Kyle Trask or like Kellen Mond or someone later in the draft, you're probably better off just being like, okay, we have complete and full confidence in our QB1 Andy Dalton. Give him all the confidence and all the encouragement in the world. See how good of a job he can do. Because, I mean, look, Rob's not a fan of Dalton. But yeah, I'm not a fan of Dalton either. But for guys like Allen Robinson, I think this is definitely an upgrade in terms of quarterback play. I do want to see where he goes with his targets because although Mitch Trubisky is not, he's not someone to write home about, but he did pepper Allen Robinson with a ton of targets. And that was the difference between him and Foles because Foles likes to spread the ball to the tight ends more and stuff like that. So this is a better move for a guy like Allen Robinson who's going to stay around with the team. Damian Williams, I think he's going to play that. I don't want to say Cordero Patterson role because it's kind of hard to replicate that sort of role, but that is a big hole that they're leaving in this offense because Patterson did take up a lot of those rushing attempts. He was involved as a pass catcher. So I imagine like Tariq Cohen kind of playing that out of the backfield slot type role. And then you have Damian Williams coming in as that change of pace. And he definitely has the ability to take away some passing downs as well. So not good news for Monty, and I just traded him away in Dynasty like 2 days before this happened, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, so my thing is this: Andy Dalton has ties to new OC Bill Lazor from their time in Cincinnati, so there is familiarity there. And the one thing I will say is, with that being said, is when Andy Dalton was quarterback in that first 8 games, that was the year it was a disaster. Right? AJ Green got hurt, Andy Dalton got hurt, but there was an first 8 games of the season. He peppered AJ Green. Like I'm talking like 9, 10, 11, consistently double-digit targets almost in 4 straight games when I was looking it up. So I think that Andy Dalton in this offense with Bill Lazor, with Matt Nagy, is going to have no problem leaning on Allen Robinson. And we saw once he came back from his concussion last year, he showed that he was competent. He's still a competent quarterback. He could actually, Cooper had his moments, and CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup actually started playing a little bit better towards the back half of the year. So I think for Allen Robinson, yes, this is going to probably be, not saying much, but it's the best quarterback he's ever had in this offense. So that's good because A.J. Green in those years with Andy Dalton got like 160, 150. Right. He had a couple big target seasons. So Dalton's proven that he'll focus to one guy. As for Damian Williams, I think he's just I would hope he's just David Montgomery insurance. He does both. He's very good in the passing game, so he's a good, reliable asset for Tariq Cohen. So that kind of worries me a little bit because now if Cohen gets hurt, they have Damian Williams that could play in that passing game role. So I do think that's a little worrisome, but I think he's just a do-it-all back, and he also has familiarity with Matt Nagy from their days in Kansas City. So I do think that there was a little bit of a crossover. He knows Matt Nagy's system, so that's why they kind of tossed it over to him. So,
yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, A.J. Green was he was a wide receiver 1 in fantasy every single season that he played at least 14 games with those Bengals. And again, bad teams overall, but Andy Dalton peppered him. And if Allen Robinson can get those targets again, look, I mean, 150 targets, back-to-back seasons, like that's a massive number. And if he can get that again with more accuracy and hopefully the offense moves a little better than it did last year on consistency, more opportunity to score as well. So Allen Robinson should still be up in that upper echelon. He's not going to win you a week, but he can definitely keep you stable weekly there. Okay, let's move on to 2 quarterbacks. Now, these are situations that we've talked plenty about in the fantasy world. These are old news at this point. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but Joe, this is the first we're hearing your reaction to this. And I believe Lucas and I broke these down. So, Bobby, you and I haven't talked about these, but quickly, Dak Prescott re-signs 4 years, $160 million with Dallas. Obviously loses half of last season due to that massive injury. Hopefully he comes back healthy. He looks fine in video and whatever, but you never know. And that offense, unfortunately, they were losing games as a franchise, but he was humming in fantasy football. Jared Goff goes over to Detroit in that swap with Matt Stafford from the Rams as well. So maybe just a comment from each of you on both these guys really quick, and we'll move on here. Dak Prescott.
No, sorry. Michael Brockers definitely had a couple comments about this trade, and it's so funny. He had to retract that and try to bring that back and try to make everything okay. I just thought that was the most hilarious part about this trade. But Dak, I felt like we all knew a deal was coming. I don't really think that second franchise tag was going to be there. Although technically he did get franchise tagged a second time, so he can't get franchise tagged again in the future. But yeah, I mean, Dak was on pace for, I believe, like over 6,000 yards or something ridiculous after his 5-game stretch. So, it'll come to how healthy he is, how healthy that offensive line is, because that's a huge problem they had last year. And if he's coming back injured and they don't have that line to protect him, then it's going to be a scary situation. Jared Goff, huge downgrade for a guy like TJ Hawkinson. Just not a consistent quarterback by any means. He's got a lot less weapons. No knock on DeAndre Swift and no knock on TJ Hawkinson, but Quintez Cephas and Brashad Perryman are not exactly Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. So he's going to have a little less to work with there. But I mean, on the flip side, Matt Stafford, that's awesome for him. He could be a potential top 10 fantasy quarterback. So kind of I don't want to say a lateral move for Detroit, because they kind of went, I don't know. It's just such a messy situation with Jared Goff. You never know what he's going to do.
Yeah, with Dak Prescott, it's more about, one of the things I target the most is teams in the second year of a system, because that's when they make the biggest jump. So it gives them a little more continuity. I know they had the same OC, Kellen Moore, but it was Mike McCarthy's offense. So COVID offseason, learning Mike McCarthy's system, it takes time. And then they come out, yes, it looks good on paper, but their defense was so trash the first 5 weeks. I mean, I know I might be over-exaggerating this, but it was like 1,600 yards in the second half or something over those first 5 games, like some absurd number of just second half yards because they were just getting blown out so much. But I'm targeting Dak. I think if there's an injury discount at all and he falls to like the 6th round, I'm the latest quarterback guy. I totally get it. I'm double-digit guy all day. But a guy like Dak Prescott with those weapons coming back is someone I'm going to be interested in if he falls a little bit because of that injury concern. The Lions, I think we have to talk about as a whole, because this team got blown up. I mean, new coaching staff, new running back, you get, wide receivers, a bunch of new stuff. And, when it comes to Jared Goff, of course, I mean, we're going to find out if he was protected by Sean McVay over the last couple of years, because his first season under Jeff Fisher did not look good. It was like the worst. He was so bad. So now he's got Anthony Lynn. We don't know if he's a true offensive genius. We haven't really seen much of him as a play caller outside of for that 1 year in Buffalo. But at the same time, they have like 300 targets vacated. So there's going to be someone who emerges from this. What is it, Hawkinson? Listen, you can say what you want about Jared Goff, but he did support plenty of fantasy relevant players in LA. So I think there's going to be one, maybe even 2 guys, especially with all these vacated targets. Hawkinson, to me, I like because Hunter Henry was viable. I mean, he was a low-end tight end. I just don't think Hawkinson has the upside anymore like he did with Stafford in that system last year. I think he's still going to be a low-end tight end 1. But I'm really interested in that wide receiver, like Tyrell Williams versus Brashard Perriman, if they don't bring in a young kid in the draft, of course. But that 2 veteran guys who've flashed a little bit in the past, I think there is something there. Tyrell Williams has ties to Anthony Lynn for 3 years with the Chargers, so that could be a leg up for him. But Perriman has shown that he could be a competent wide receiver too. So, and then finally, who's going to play the slot? Danny Amendola is gone. That's always interesting to me because Jared Goff targets the slot more than any quarterback in the NFL. I mean, look at Cooper Kupp, look at the tight end production from LA. If you watch it, the Football Outsiders is a really cool thing called slot versus wide, and they break it down, and Jared Goff on top of the list every time. So whoever gets to play inside, which could be Hawkinson because he's in the middle of the field, is going to dominate targets in this offense.
Joe, how do you feel about Jamal Williams, running back coming over from Green Bay, now in there with Detroit?
We'll leave you all the good ones, Joe.
Yeah. I'll just leave. Me and Sky are going to turn off our mics when it gets Kenny Golladay. We'll just let Bobby go free range on that one. But yeah, I mean, at first I felt it was like a huge buzzkill for DeAndre Swift. But looking back at it, DeAndre Swift was playing like 34, 35% of the snaps last season. on average, like throughout the whole entire year. So when it comes down to the end of year and when he started playing more snaps, like he was a high end running back 2, low running back 1. So you take out Adrian Peterson from that equation, you put Jamal Williams in there, even if Swift is getting 55, 60%, which I think it'll be more than that percent of the snaps, he could still very well be a high end running back 2. Obviously the offense isn't as intriguing without Galladay and Marvin Jones and Matthew Stafford, but volume is volume. And I really don't see where else they can go with the ball. If they draft like a Jalen Waddle or someone like that, my opinion might change. But as of right now, Bobby mentioned it, 300 vacated targets. Swift's been a very good pass catcher last year in his rookie season. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him.
His ADP is like top 12. Are you touching him in that range?
That's tough. It's tough. I don't want to touch him in the second round.
Yeah.
If he can fall to the third, I don't think he will. But if he can fall to the third, that's a spot where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm 100% going to grab him. But second round is not a spot I want to touch him. I feel like there's more intriguing guys like James Robinson, Joe Mixon, one of my favorites. I know not a lot of people are still on the Joe Mixon train. Austin Eckler. Oh, you're on it? Nice.
Yeah. Choo-choo.
That and Chris Herndon, we got something. Nice.
Giddy up, baby.
We're his best friends now. This is fantastic.
Yeah, and, I think a big thing is like people had DeAndre Swift, and then Anthony Lynn goes to the Lions, and Bobby actually put out a great tweet of the work that Austin Eckler was getting under, and not just him, but I mean these are Shady McCoy and some of these other guys under Anthony Lynn in the pass game, and all of us started salivating. Well, Jamal Williams has kind of been the like backup thorn in our side as fantasy players because he takes away from Aaron Jones and blah blah blah. The reality is like he's not Aaron Jones, and he's probably not even DeAndre Swift, but he's good. I mean, he's a pass catcher.
Yeah,
he can
good.
run between the tackles. He's a legitimate running back. He's a great personality. He seems like an awesome dude to just have in the locker room. And the Chargers have been terribly struck with injury to the running back position for years. I mean, and if Austin Eckler could stay healthy for an entire season, maybe he would see more of that dominant number one work. But frankly, even when Melvin Gordon was there, Austin Eckler was taken from him. When Austin Eckler was there, we had other guys taken away from him over the last 2 years. So I think Anthony Lynn, although doesn't have a for sure RBBC necessarily, he's not a bell cow guy either. And I just want to make that point that like I'm excited about DeAndre Swift, great talent. I loved him coming out of Georgia last year, whatever. But the reality is like Jamal Williams is no snuff, and they paid him $7.5 million over 2 years. Like that's not like let's see if it works out money. That's come over here and contribute to our team, help keep this kid healthy. And look, Kerryon Johnson's around-ish. They could still bring in a veteran just because, and they've been a backfield for a long time that has been multiple heads there. So I just look, if he's in I'm not going to rank him in the top 12, and I'm not going to draft him in the top 12. There's no way. So I probably won't end up with any DeAndre Swift on my teams. I would have to wait till like the 4th round. It has nothing to do with him. It has to do with the coaching scheme and that Jamal Williams is actually legit. He's not just a backup. So I'm actually maybe like on the wrong side of the fence for most people here. I was very excited like everyone else, but as soon as Jamal Williams went there, I kind of threw my hands up from DeAndre Swift.
I think a big thing about the Jamal Williams thing, though, is Aaron Jones was driven by touchdowns. He was a dominant touchdown scorer.
Yeah,
we don't
absolutely.
expect Swift to be at 14, 15 rushing / receiving touchdowns. And when you look at the splits between when Jamal Williams was healthy and when he was on the field, he did make an impact on Aaron Jones. So I just think that where you have to draft Swift, and I just looked it up, it's early best ball 10 ADP is 17. So that's premium middle of the second round. He doesn't have the upside because Jamal Williams will have a role. So I think it's just you have to think and he's also good insurance. If he might be just like a high end handcuff because he's going to have standalone value, low end flex, and if something happens to Swift, he could be the bell cow.
Yeah,
I totally agree. And again, I'm a little bit hesitant personally, but great talent, obviously. And look, I'm not saying I don't draft him at any cost and any of that kind of stuff.
Right? Yeah.
But just temper expectations. We talked about Jamal Williams. Let's talk about Aaron Jones here. Again, old news, but let's get into it really quickly. Aaron Jones re-signed 4 years, $48 million. We thought he was going to leave. Everybody wanted him to go to Atlanta. He ends up back in Green Bay, but they get rid of Jamal Williams. Obviously, we have A.J. Dillon there as well. Matt Stafford heads over from Detroit to the Rams, and we also have Deshaun Jackson coming in at 34 years old, a one-year deal with the Rams as well. So let's kind of combine all these guys quick. Deshaun Jackson, more of a new fit here, but one-trick pony at this point. And Aaron Jones and Matt Stafford, kind of old news, but want to flip this to you guys here really quick.
Joe, I'm always going to concede to the guest, so you go ahead, man.
Okay. I'll step right ahead. So, Aaron Jones without Jamal Williams, I still think A.J. Dillon's going to eat into his workload a little bit. Let's see you guys clear some way.
Hold on. I'm sorry, Joe. I don't mean to cut you off, and this is very rude. This is awesome. You're a guest. This is unprofessional as hell, and I apologize for this. I have to just pause really quick and give a shout out to my man Rob Berger. Here's why. At nighttime, I do TCK stuff, and this is my bloodline. I've done TCK for years. During the day, I run a show with Ryan Leaf, former NFL quarterback, Heisman finalist, the whole thing. Rob Berger is a huge supporter and listener to that show, and he's on every single show commenting. And now he has come over to hang out with us in fantasy football. And for those of you, great supporter, Rob. I appreciate it. For those of you not seeing the screen on YouTube on the podcast, his comment here is listening to you guys clears up why I suck at fantasy. I clearly do not do my homework. Jesus, Rob, that's why we're here for you, brother. That's why we're here for you. Stay tuned, my man. Always appreciate your love. Thank you so much for tuning in. Sorry, Joe. Go ahead, bud.
No. That was awesome. That's awesome. It's nice to see people going from one place to another, and you got the support. That's awesome. I love to see it. So, hi, Rob. Probably don't know who I am. I'm Joe. But
Joe's the one with the knowledge. Check him out.
We'll see. You guys are, right there. So, Aaron Jones. Again, I think A.J. Dillon's going to eat into his work just as much as Jamal Williams did. A.J. Dillon, towards the end of the year, started to get some extra carries. And I believe he had that one big game. I don't know if it was against Houston. I forget who they played. Maybe they didn't even play Houston. I should have came a little bit more prepared than that. But, Aaron Jones just vaults himself back into that top 10 running back category. He's going to see the passing work. He's going to get the work on the ground. There's no reason to think this offense is going to slow down. I mean, Aaron Rodgers had his second year with Matt LaFleur. Other than the offensive line, losing David Bakhtiari and Corey Linsley. So they have some holes to fill in that point, which is going to hurt him a little bit. But we'll see. We'll see. Deshaun Jackson, just real quick, you said he's a one-trick pony. Absolutely he is. But when he does do that trick, he does it well. Yeah. I mean, he's still fast.
He's very good at the trick. He's well rehearsed.
Yeah, he's a very good pony. No, but he is still a very, very fast guy. And if he is healthy, I wouldn't be surprised to see one or two games where he just blows up and, it takes away from guys like Woods and Cups. But again, he's a guy who he'll give you 3 good games. And then even in those 3 games, you don't know if that's going to be like the time where he blows up. So
and let's not forget, Matt Stafford is not shy to fling it 60 yards at any given moment. And Deshaun Jackson for the last 15 years has been one of the best ball picks you can make if you play in that format. I mean, he might only give you 4 games, but he'll probably win you a week each of those 4 games. So like that. Bobby, any more? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say, like, what they were missing over the last couple of years, that Brandon Cooks role. I mean, that's Deshaun Jackson can fit that perfectly for them, that deep threat, because Woods, Kupp, and Higbee are not those kind of guys, and they need to open up for those guys yards after the catch because that's where they dominate. So that's a guy like Deshaun Jackson can do for them. I think it just enhances the offense if he can stay healthy. I don't know if I'm buying him necessarily as a fantasy asset himself, but I will say this. I might peek at him at the end of the draft because that's upside. It's once you get to the last 3 rounds, you can't lose your league. You can only win it. So those kind of guys can blow up. I think it really helps with Stafford. I am wheels up on Stafford. I've said this on the podcast before. I think he could be this year's Tom Brady in the sense going to a new team with a good offensive scheme, good weapons. I mean, this is the best cast he's ever had. And this guy had Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate one time, but this is still across the board is probably the best weapons he's had on a team with the best offensive mind. So I think Stafford, to me, is definitely an option later in drafts. I think it just overall really helps him because that deep threat, he's a great deep thrower. So I think that's just going to open up the offense, open up things for Woods and Kupp. I think it's great across the board.
As a Niner fan, I am quite nervous about having Matt Stafford coming into our division. I'll just put it that way. All right, boys, we got one more, and we're going to take a quick commercial break to give a shout out to our family over at the Jersey Jungle. Before we do that, though, Jameis Winston comes back, re-signs with the New Orleans Saints, 1 year, $5.5 million, and Ty Montgomery re-signs as well. We're not worried about Ty Montgomery. It's Alvin Kamara all day, and it's Latavius Murray if he needs a breather. But let's talk about Jameis really quickly, and if we want to make it a Jameis Taysom conversation, we can, but more so, Jameis does get re-signed by the Saints, and really, I think it was either the Herd or Rich Eisen show. I can't remember where it was. I apologize, but there was a audio clip of 15-20 seconds or so of Jameis Winston talking to a reporter about what Drew Brees meant to him and who Drew Brees was this last year. And I think Drew Brees just straight up humbled the shit out of Jameis Winston straight up. And him being a backup after being the top of the food chain his entire life at quarterback, playing behind one of the top 3 quarterbacks of all time, getting humble pie all season long, I think it hopefully tremendously shaped his character in a positive, and hopefully you can turn it around for his sake. How do you guys feel about Jameis returning? We can stay off of Ty Montgomery for time, but how do we feel about Jameis back in New Orleans? And do you think ultimately it will be him, or will it be Taysom Hill with Drew Brees retiring?
I think it'll be Winston. I think as much as Sean Payton loved to get Taysom Hill out there for a couple games, I think he really, really likes having the option of having 2 quarterbacks on the field at the same time, having a guy like Taysom on the field at the same time as Jameis, and just lining him up in all different spots, letting him run out of the backfield. So I think he likes Taysom in that role. And I think, like you said, Jameis is humbled now. And don't forget that the offseason after he left Tampa Bay and went to New Orleans, he got LASIK eye surgery. So maybe he's starting to see a little clearer. He's a little more humble. He's got a possession receiver in Michael Thomas. I don't know. Things could be looking up. If he is the starter, if he is Sean Payton goes 100%, Jameis Winston's our guy, would you guys consider him a top 15 quarterback, top 20, top 10? I'd probably say top 15 for me.
If he's 100% the starter with Taysom Hill doing what Taysom Hill does, even Sean Payton took a Hall of Famer off the field for like 9 plays a game to let third string tight end run the ball. I mean, so that's going to happen. If Jameis is definitely the guy, then yeah, he's top 15 probably. And look, it might be ugly for the Saints. If I'm a Saints fan, I'm a little nervous because the only thing I remember is 30 interceptions from Jameis Winston. Nobody talks about 5,000 yards and 33 touchdowns. They talk about 30 interceptions. If he can cut that in half or even 20, he should be fine in this offense with his defensive coaching staff. I'm okay with him. But look, fantasy football, even in that season he did that, he was top 6, I believe. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, when he got hurt, he was top 6 as well. So these guys should be just fine.
My thought process is it's really important for the team as a whole who wins, because Taysom Hill is going to carry his own fantasy value as a runner, but he's going to deflate guys like Kamara and Michael Thomas because he's not as a pure thrower like Jameis Winston. So it's really important for us to monitor because it's not like, oh yeah, whoever wins, it doesn't matter. It does really matter, because Michael Thomas, to me, with Jameis Winston, is more justified as a top 10 to 12 wide receiver, but Taysom Hill, not so much. Alvin Kamara is more justified as a top 5 running back with Jameis Winston. Taysom Hill, we saw that he did not get the passing game work with Taysom Hill last year. So that definitely changes how you draft Kamara. My thing, too, the problem with Jameis Winston, though, is, yes, I love Michael Thomas and I love Alvin Kamara, but there's a lot of unproven guys behind him. Jared Cook is gone. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. Now you're looking at younger players who haven't proven anything yet in that receiving core. Adam Troutman, for example, at tight end. Now, Jameis has proven he loves tight ends. So Adam Troutman could be a sleeper. We've seen plenty of tight ends dominate in a Sean Payton offense. So I think from a fantasy perspective, I would like to see Jameis Winston win out, but I just don't see him have the weapons around him to be a top 12 quarterback next year.
I agree. And we shall see. Of course, it's going to be a position battle heading into training camp, but I see it being Jameis overall and Taysom Hill still having his role. Okay, boys, we have quite a bit to get into, but before we do that, let's give a quick shout out to the Jersey Jungle. Once again, make sure to DM the Jersey Jungle on Instagram. Use the promo code TCK, 3 letters, TCK, 10% off of 1 jersey, 10% off of 2 jerseys, 15% off of 3 or more jerseys. We talked about this last time. These are game authentic jerseys. Bring you back up here. This is an opportunity to get a jersey like I have right behind me. Justin Herbert, I got from the Jersey Jungle. Nice, clean, fresh. It is stitch and twill. I can't quite show you that, but it's not the pressed on, right? This is like sewn on, legit, worn, nice, fits perfect. And I really appreciate what they have going on. These are jerseys that started about $60 before the TCK discount. If you go to NFL.com, you're going to get this Justin Herbert jersey for $120. Feel free to Google it right now. I promise you, this jersey behind me is $120 on NFL.com. Through the Jersey Jungle, it's $60. And if you use the promo code, you get 10 to 15% off of that as well. So feel free to do that, please. And all of the fantasy football analyst family out there as well, feel free to use our promo code as well if you'd like to, and get ahead of one of these new free agents. Maybe one of your favorite players just left the team, so you want to get some of that nostalgia and keep it, or you want to get maybe a Bucs jersey from the Super Bowl or claim your team this year. Jump on one of your fantasy football heroes, whoever it is, feel free to jump in there and grab yourself a jersey from the Jersey Jungle. Once again, that is at the Jersey Jungle. On Instagram specifically is where they like to be connected. Use the TCK promo code for 10% off of 1 or 2 jerseys, 15% off of 3 jerseys. And before we go any further, I want to give a quick shout out to our man, Joe Volpe, the fantasy football analyst.
I love that.
My man, Joe Volpe, Joey, you're Joey. Bobby and I are big fans. Appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. I want to give a quick shout out as well to one of my best brothers in the business in the comments here, really quick, tuning in. Fun fact, everybody, this guy right here, Curly8812, if you've been with the TCK pod since the beginning of 2018, Curly and Daniel and I started this podcast before Lucas, before Bobby, before Dwayne. Curly and I started this podcast. Childhood friend of mine, grew up in the Bay Area together, and he is off to bigger, better things in Arizona these days. He lives down the street from the fantasy footballers now, but started with the TCK pod. So Curly, I love you, brother, and blessings to you and the family, my man. All right, let's continue on here. We got a lot to cover, so I'm going to shave out a handful of these irrelevant names for fantasy, but let's get into the rest of the NFC breakdown for free agency. And give me just 1 second, please. Okay, and Kenny Golladay, 27 years old, signs a 4-year, $72 million deal. And then if you want to mention Kyle Rudolph, also goes from Minnesota to the New York Football Giants, our resident New York Football Giants fan. Bobby, take all the time you need, my man. Kenny Golladay heads to the Giants.
Well, sweet emotion. I love it. I mean, so this is the thing about Kenny Golladay is extremely important. He gives Jason Garrett that Dez Bryant, Terrell Owens factor player in his offense. We've seen dominant target seasons from those kind of guys. Darius Slayton was an outcast as a true outside number 1 wide receiver. We saw plenty of times when he got shadowed by better cornerbacks, he got completely shut out. You cannot shadow Kenny G. Trust me. I've actually looked into it. He is a monster even against shadow coverage, but he now puts those other receivers in better positions. You have Darius Slayton, who's that vertical outside threat. The Terrence Williams role is a much better suited player, gets second or third corners. Shepard kicks into the slot, which he is fantastic at doing with Golden Tate out the window. Now he can dominate nickel corners. He doesn't have to be the focal point like he was last year. And as for Kyle Rudolph, listen, Evan Ingram to me, they talk a lot about they can make the different personnels, but Evan Ingram's a glorified slot receiver playing a tight end role. He is a big physical specimen, but does not block. Kyle Rudolph is your Jason Witten. So Jason Witten dominated for years in this offense. He is Kyle Rudolph's like a replica of Jason Witten, you would think. So I would like to see Evan Ingram leave just to open up more targets. But even if he stays, it puts this offense in a better position. I think it puts Daniel Jones on his second season with Jason Garrett firmly. I think he's a sleeper to be a top 12 quarterback, especially because of his rushing ability as well. And overall, I just think I'm super excited just as a Giants fan because I got to go to the Jersey Jungle and get myself a jersey.
Absolutely do. So make sure you go to the Jersey Jungle on Instagram at the Jersey Jungle TCK Pod, my man Bobby. I'm really stoked for you, man. There's nothing like one of your favorite players going to your favorite teams. I had my Kenny Golladay moment was many, many moons ago when the one and only Randy Moss gave the 49ers a few games. And he wasn't he was Randall Moss maybe at that point of his career, but nonetheless, it was awesome to have another Hall of Famer sporting the Niners jersey. So I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to go from Kenny Golladay and all that stoke from my man Bobby to none other than Joe the Hitman Flacco.
Ooh.
Signs a 1-year, $4 million deal in Philadelphia. I literally don't even want to talk about this, but I have to mention it because it's our responsibility as professionals. My question to you guys is, serious conversation. If Jalen Hurts goes down, does Joe Flacco, obviously a completely different quarterback in a skill set, but at this point at 36 years old, a backup for the Jets after 15 years with the Ravens, does Joe Flacco really give the Eagles an opportunity to win that division if Jalen Hurts were to go down in, let's say, week 4? No jinx, knock on wood.
Better than Nate Sudfeld.
Ooh,
or whatever that's
a little stab at Sudfeld. Yikes.
You're not supposed to call players out. Come on.
friend of the podcast, Nate Sudfeld. Hey.
Oh, no. Waiting for the YouTube comment on the little.
Sorry, Nate. I just never. We'll take it back. We'll take it back. No, I don't see it happening. Anything to mention here about Uncle Joe?
No, but I think if you watch the game last year, he had an awesome game against the Pats last year. And he was doing Repairman and Mims and those guys. He actually looked better than Darnold. I think he's the perfect backup. If you need 3 games, he can get you 2-1. And the problem, though, is Joe Flacco's not in the stage of his career where he's going to elevate a bunch of talent around him. So they cannot do a long stretch. But if he needs to play a spot start here and there, he could definitely put him into position to win. The Jets, he showed it with the Jets last year. So the Eagles have bigger problems, like skill position players, before they worry about Joe Flacco stepping in for Jalen Hurts.
Fair enough, folks. You heard it here. I think Bobby's going to go get that 3-pack of maybe Kenny Golladay, Joe Flacco, and someone else from the Jersey Jungle. I love to see that.
Joke's done. You already got it. So
already in the mail. Love it. All right, boys, let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks here. A lot of talk about Russell Wilson. We'll get into that kind of stuff later on here. Chris Carson, 26 years old, comes back, re-signed for 2 years, $14.5 million. Alex Collins, this is like his 4th time on the Seahawks, I think, kind of pulling a Ricky Henderson here. Alex Collins, also 26 years old, feels like he's 36, re-signed for a 1-year deal as well. Gerald Everett, this is actually one of the sneaky best signings, in my opinion, of all of free agency. Gerald Everett, also 26 years old, 1 year, $6 million, the tight end, formerly of the Rams, now with Seattle. Once again, Chris Carson and Gerald Everett with the Seahawks.
Yeah, so Chris Carson was a little bit of a surprise. I feel like when he didn't get franchise tag, which wasn't all that much of a surprise. Rob's not a fan of Flacco.
Rob, that's my man. That's my man.
Oh, the Super Bowl, yes. But yeah, so Chris Carson coming back, kind of a little bit of a shock. I feel like a lot of us thought he was going to move on, but I guess he really didn't like the offers he was getting or wasn't getting the offers. Seattle said, screw it, we'll bring him back. So with Carlos Hyde not being there, Chris Carson kind of jumps back into that borderline running back 1 conversation. I believe he was on pace for around 50 catches last year, which is huge. He did get a good amount of volume in the backfield last year, and without Carlos Hyde there, it'll open some extra stuff up. So it'll be interesting to see what Seattle does in the draft. They are the type of team to draft a running back now in the first 3 or 4 rounds, just because that's what they would do. I mean, it seems like they're the team every year that's always on their 6th, 7th string running back towards the end of the year, forcing Marshawn Lynch out of retirement and, bring back Robert Turbin and stuff like that, and just trying to get the wheels turning. So, and the name you haven't heard in a while, right?
I love it.
Christian Michael still around, or what?
Yeah. Oh man, that was it.
That was a good
Michael,
4 games, huh?
That was the best hype. They should do a 30 for 30 on him.
Thomas Rawls. I mean, like, we have many options, but I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and that goes to show why Alex Collins is back with Seattle. I mean, they brought him back last year because of the familiarity with the team, and they didn't have any running backs. So Alex Collins makes his way back. Gerald Everett, familiarity with Shane Waldron, that's going to be huge for him. And again, like I mentioned before about if they bring in Antonio Brown, but if Russell Wilson's throwing 35 touchdowns, I mean, Gerald Everett might be in a spot where he ends the year. Sure, he might have like 30 catches for 300, 400 yards, whatever it might be, but he might have 8 touchdowns when it's all said and done as well. So I'm sure he's going to get hit.
That's a top 6-8 tight end.
Exactly. It's not that hard to be a top 10
alone,
yeah. Exactly. It's not that hard to beat. So that's just my thoughts on those guys. What about you, Bobby?
Yeah, so with Carson, I think it's a lot of people are going to have a stigma around him, right? They're going to it's old news, but the thing is, he is a stud. Right now, his ADP in best ball 10s is in the 50s overall. That's a buy all day. I mean, listen, I know we get tired of drafting the same players all the time, but he's proven that this offense, they love him. They gave him good money, and the thing is, too, Rashad Penny's his only real competition, and Penny, I know we're talking about Alex Collins, but Penny is not proven to be healthy yet. So I think Chris Carson, especially in a Russell Wilson-led offense, is a perfectly fine third-round pick, and you could probably even get him in the 4th, so it's something to monitor. As for Gerald Everett, he's like you just touched on perfectly with Shane Waldron. He's in the unique position where he actually knows more about the offense by leaving teams. Like usually the guys have a leg up on him. He has a leg up on a guy like Will Dissly. Now, the Seahawks do have a lot of vacated targets, so they have about 140 vacated targets, and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett already dominate targets. So there's plenty of other players that can emerge. And that Will Dissly versus Gerald Everett matchup could be pivotal because they don't even have a third wide receiver right now on the roster that's notable. So something to monitor. I think that Gerald Everett versus Will Dissly could produce a tight end 1 next year.
I think Gerald Everett might be my Logan Thomas call that Bobby had last season where nobody was talking about Logan Thomas. Bobby pulls him out of the woods and crushed it. Gerald Everett might be that guy for me. Russell Wilson wants a tight end. He targets the 9 tight ends that they have on the team. None of them are as athletic or capable as Gerald Everett. And of course, Greg Olsen now gone. Okay, boys, we got a couple more guys here. We're getting long in the tooth. Let's blast through the last couple. Don't really need to talk about my Niners too much. Rob, if you're still with us, feel free to chime in and let me know how you feel about the 49ers. Kyle Juszczyk comes in, 29 years old, 5-year, $27 million. This is a lot of money for a fullback, 3+ for a fullback, which is great. And then Jerick McKinnon is still at large, and he's just on the list. Kyle Juszczyk is not a fantasy name, but he is the glue that makes everything happen in that offense. Great pass blocker, kind of a Rex Burkhead, if you will, pass catcher if they need him. He ends up scoring 4 or 5 touchdowns a year. You don't play him in fantasy, but he is the one that allows Mostert and Jeff Wilson to be who they're going to be. So keep an eye and, give a shout out to my boy, Kyle Juszczyk. All right, let's move into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. Again, kind of old news at this point, but let's talk about the defending Super Bowl champs. Chris Godwin, still just 24 years old, franchise tagged by the Buccaneers. Rob Gronkowski, 31, going to run it back with Brady, 1 year, $8 million. And then Leonard Fournette and AB, Antonio Brown, still at large. A lot of conversation all over the league. These guys are trying to get the bag after winning a Super Bowl. And both of them did contribute in the back half of the season and the Super Bowl, but nonetheless getting it done. So the Buccaneers pretty much running it back on offense and defense. A lot of offensive line moves we don't talk about in fantasy circles, but they have done such a great job taking pay cuts around the block to make it happen again, re-signing their defense and everything else. So how do we feel quickly about Godwin and Gronk returning back to Tampa Bay? And we'll save Leonard Fournette and Antonio Brown when something actually happens with these guys.
Yeah, so Gronk is going to be interesting with OJ Howard coming back, which a lot of people seem to just forget he exists. But yeah, I mean, OJ Howard's going to come back, and he seemed to be the guy before he got hurt. He was the one getting the most targets. But once OJ Howard did go down in that second half of the season, Gronk started to turn it up. He started to get games where he was scoring. He started to get games where he was getting targeted a lot. And then that kind of translated to playoffs and eventually the Super Bowl where he caught 2 touchdowns. So it's second year back off retirement. He's still working hard in the offseason. He's still huge. He's still the same personality. He's still the same person. So you can't discount Gronk potentially being that top 10 tight end. It's always going to be a possibility as long as he just exists, especially if Antonio Brown doesn't return, because he's another guy who has taken up a lot of targets. And I'm sure Bobby's got the vacated targets ingrained in his brain right now.
138.
There you go.
Just off the top of my head, about 138.
Something like 138. But Chris Godwin coming back, it's going to be a very similar situation to last year. But now we know comfortably that Mike Evans is the wide receiver one in this offense. We know comfortably that Mike Evans is going to get his share, and he's going to be the main guy that you want to go after. But where do you guys have Chris Godwin ranked? Because I feel like the wide receivers are so hard to rank this year. I've tried to go through the list and make the order, but Chris Godwin just ends up falling to the 20s, which doesn't really make sense to me. I feel like he should be higher. But
yeah, Scott, let's take that one.
Oh, between 15 and 18 for now. I mean, in PPR, it's going to be a little bit more, but, Brady wants Mike. I mean, here's the deal. I think Bruce Arians wants Mike Evans is the number one, and I think Brady wants Godwin is the number one, just the style that they're playing right now. But nonetheless, I mean, Mike Evans had a couple rough games where he literally had one catch or two catches, 2 targets for a touchdown, whatever. But Chris Godwin's going to get work. I am a little it all comes down to AB. If AB is definitely not on the Buccaneers, then I'm going to have Chris Godwin top 15 for sure, and Mike Evans, both of them. Sure. If AB comes back, I don't know. I'm probably going to fade them both in drafts anyway, and the rankings will be lower. Sneak attack name, and again, we'll get into this when we talk about the fantasy, the free agency backwards conversation next week. Keep an eye on Tyler Johnson, especially if AB does not come back. That kid's legit. Brady loves him. I think Tyler Johnson, honestly, at this point of his career, could be an upgrade over Antonio Brown. And don't hear what I'm not saying, but I just think that Tyler Johnson is legit. And if AB doesn't come back, he's a great name to target late in your drafts.
I think you're going to get a great discount on Chris Godwin because of his injuries. Listen, Bruce Arians, you can say what you want about he's a vertical style offensive guy. He loves to attack downfield. I love it's Brady's second year in his system or whatever hybrid system they threw together over the course of the season. I think there's still room to grow. I think that Brady is going to get more comfortable with these guys, and that's only fantasy gold. Godwin right now is ADP, best ball 10s, which is early. I totally get it, but it's in the 40s. And that's a 4th-round pick. I think that makes him – to me, we've seen over the years, even Bruce Arians, his scheme has a big slot receiver. Reggie Wayne, Larry Fitzgerald, even way back in the day, Anquan Bolden, like those kind of players have dominated in the slot role for Bruce Arians. And not Anquan Bolden, Hines Ward. Yeah, I'm like, I must be high. Anyway, I'm just saying, like, there's been big slot receivers that have dominated in Bruce Arians' specific scheme. And that's Chris Godwin to a T. And, like, you look at his targets when he got healthy. I mean, listen, they were he was in and out of the lineup, but towards into the playoffs, 12, 7, 9 type of targets. That's what I'm talking about. Coming from a Hall of Famer, I think AB does throw a wrench, but that's when AB was on the field. So if Leonard Fournette leaves, there really isn't now James White going back to New England. There is no pass catching running back either. So there's not a running back that Brady's checking down to constantly. He's pushing the ball downfield. I think the O.J. Howard thing is something interesting because now you have great O.J. Howard and Rob Gronkowski. And Bruce Arians, he doesn't really use tight ends that much. So I think it's going to be crowded, and I think it's going to be something hands off for fans.
Keyshawn Vaughn, pass catching running back.
I just think listen. So when you look at Brady's,
it's not Ronald Jones.
Well, this is my thing. If you look at Brady's early career, when he had weapons, he did not check down to his running backs. He was throwing to guys like Aaron Hernandez, Gronk, Wes Welker, because he had talent. Over the latter half of his New England years, James White arguably was his best receiver behind Edelman for like 2+ years. He didn't have anybody. So everyone thought Brady's checking down, but this year he proved he's not. That was because he had nobody. I mean, look what Cam Newton did with those guys. He did nothing. So I think when he has the weapons, he goes to his best receivers, and that's what he proved this year.
Fair enough, man. I like that take a lot. All right, boys, let's end up here. Rob's got a question I'll get to at the very end, but let's get into the Washington football team. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 38 years old, 1 year, $10 million deal. Curtis Samuel coming in for the Panthers, 24 years old, 3 years, $34.5 million. That's significant coin from my man Curtis Samuel. Adam Humphries coming in here, started with the Titans, I believe, and the Buccaneers, 27 years old. And then you have Lamar Miller as well, unfortunately, on the back end of his career. So why don't we focus on Fitzmagic and Curtis Samuel?
Yeah, so Fitzmagic he's going to elevate this offense to. I mean, look at like what Terry's been playing with for the last couple of years. Let's see if we can name off some of these quarterbacks: Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, and that's the guys he's had to play with, and that's not good at all. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, say what you want, he's a significant upgrade because at the very least, he's a guy who's going to jam it down the field. He's going to put his players in a position. Oh, Bobby's salivating right now.
I love it. Jersey jungle. I'm going to get a Fitzpatrick jersey.
It's Flacco Galladay. Count it.
We gotta start a cart, like have the little cart.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be full at this point, but. Hey, buy 3 or more. What is it? 15% off?
Yes, sir. It is.
And the code is what's the code? What's the code?
TCK.
TCK. Easy. But Curtis Samuel. Yeah, there you go. Maybe get a Curtis Samuel jersey. I mean, so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Curtis Samuel. Where is he going to play? Is he going to play in the slot now that they have Adam Humphries there?
Yeah,
maybe a little bit more of Curtis Samuel on the outside, but again, at this point, Adam Humphries' career, how old is he? Is it? I'm trying to wait for the graphic to like.
27 years old.
27. Oh, okay, so he's still on the younger side. I was going to say if Adam Humphries, I don't even know how long he's been in the league at this point, but if he's a little older, maybe we could see Curtis Samuel dominating the slot. Adam Humphries coming in as kind of like a relief type thing. Cam Sims, I think they liked him on the outside in the latter half of last year, so. Maybe there's potential for him to be there, Curtis Samuel in the slot, and then Adam Humphries filling in. I don't know. I want to see where these guys line up. I want to see how they use Curtis Samuel. I'm sure they'll use him in the backfield as well. And this is the perfect football move for this team. I think it's great. He's a great complement to Terry. He's exactly what this offense needed next to Terry. And it doesn't even hurt Terry to the point where if they went after someone like Kenny Galladay or Allen Robinson or a big name like that, that really could have hurt Terry a lot more. So I think this is a perfect situation for everyone involved, including Curtis Samuel, who I think could be a wide receiver too, potentially. It's such a loaded class, so it's hard to define him as that. But there's a world where he is.
Yeah, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, I love it because of the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick is so aggressive, and he's not going to check it down like Alex Smith. We didn't really get to see. I mean, granted, last year their talent around Terry McLaurin, it was Logan Thomas, and then it was McKissick and Gibson, probably arguably the best pass catchers because they didn't have a lot of wide receivers. And then Fitzpatrick's coming in, and he's not going to check it down. Like, I actually looked at Fitzpatrick's targets. He actually leans a little bit more to wide receivers than most quarterbacks. He does dabble in tight ends, and he's like a little bit under your typical towards running back. So he's going to be chucking it downfield. The thing with Curtis Samuels, we kind of know because he actually played with Scott Turner 2 years ago and under Ron Rivera, and they know how they kind of use him as a deep threat. And that's interesting because we saw Curtis Samuel. We kind of liked how that Joe Brady used him as a kind of a running back out of the backfield, yards of the catch. Scott Turner didn't do that 2 years ago. They used him as a threat. Now, so Kyle Allen 2 years ago was probably one of the worst deep passers in the NFL, completing under 30% of his balls that traveled over 20 yards. Ryan Fitzpatrick is actually almost 20% higher over the last 3 years in deep ball accuracy. So if you factor that in, I think it was Curtis Samuel's 5 receptions on 27 deep targets with Kyle Allen 2 years ago in this scheme. I mean, if you can get somewhere to 10 to 12 with Ryan Fitzpatrick, that's just a huge upside for Curtis Samuel. Deep ball threat, perfect complement for a Terry McLaurin's more possession type receiver. So I think this is just awesome. I think I'm really excited for it. It's a competition, right? Maybe, but I think it's good news. I think for the running backs, I think J.D. McKissick won't be as leaned on. I would like to see Antonio Gibson take the next step in pass pro, become a 3-down back, become the poor man's Christian McCaffrey. He deserves to be in our hearts. And I want him to become they used him like McCaffrey just a couple of years ago in Norv Turner and Scott Turner's scheme. So I think Fitzpatrick, let's go. Wheels up. Jersey Jungle, make it happen.
Totally agree. We have one last question here from Rob. Rob, I'm going to throw this at you here. Is the back to the Seahawks very quickly, boys? I want to spend 30 seconds or less on this. Is the relationship with Russell Wilson in trouble? Can he still get traded this year? My short answer is yes. You never hear he and Pete Carroll coming out having each other's back. Russell Wilson's not some player to throw a coach under the bus. Neither is Pete Carroll, but you don't have it happening. They had turf wars in New England for 20 years, and the guys always worked it out for the betterment of the team. I could definitely see Russell Wilson still leaving, and it might just come down to the draft because no team in the NFL can give the Seahawks what they want for Russell Wilson. The Bears already tried a couple first-round picks, a couple third-round picks, a couple players. When it comes draft day, there might be talks already and deals done behind the scenes that on draft day, we're going to give you, 7 picks or something stupid. If they do that, then I could see him moving on draft day. My short answer is, though, yes, it's in trouble overall. Yes, I could see him still getting traded this year. Maybe 15 seconds apiece. How you guys feel about it?
I mean, we basically hit everything on the nail. There's not really too much else to add to that. Maybe he leaves, maybe he doesn't, but at this point, it seems a lot less likely that he will.
How are you going to find a franchise quarterback to replace him? I just don't think they grow on trees. And Russell Wilson's proven time and time again he's competent, and let alone competent, he's great. So
he's amazing. He's amazing.
Exactly. So it's just like it doesn't even make any sense that he's like the winningest coach in Seahawks, winningest quarterback. It's like ridiculous. So I don't think it happens because they're not going to get unless they do some crazy fun thing where they get Deshaun Watson involved, like a 3-team trade thing, maybe. But I doubt it.
That's a whole nother discussion we're not gonna get into right now. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get out of here, I want to give another shout out to our boy Joe Volpe, aka Fantasy Football Analyst on Instagram, primarily fantasy.football.analyst. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. We really do hope to have you back on the podcast, not only again, but hopefully with some frequency again, like for real. Bobby and I both have admired your work for a long time. We've been trying to get this going for quite a while and finally able to have you on. So again, thank you so much for coming and joining us for the last 2 episodes on Tuesday and again tonight. Appreciate your time and energy, brother. Please let all the TCK Potters know where they can go and support your work.
Yeah, so you can go right here, Instagram. This backwards thing is still throwing me off.
Yeah, right.
You can go on Instagram and check me out, fantasy.football.analyst. Got my website, the FF Analyst. I started doing some TikTok stuff recently, the FF Analyst. Twitter, the FF Analyst. Either one of those 2, you'll find me just about any platform.
Just find this logo, ladies and gentlemen. You can't lose him. No, he's gone. He's gone now. Just make sure that you check out this logo. Our man Joe coming back every time, man. Always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you so much for joining us, brother. Absolutely. Rob Berger, big up, my man. Thank you again so much for tuning in, buddy. Rob, we'll see you tomorrow at noon on the Ryan D. Leaf Show, will we not? Dun, dun, dun. All right, folks. Appreciate you guys. Episode 373 in the books, NFC recap to free agency. We'll be back with you next week to turn free agency around and look at the rest of the team now that these guys have fallen where they have fallen. Make sure to follow Fantasy Football _TCK Pod on Instagram, on TikTok, TCK Pod, Facebook at the Candlestick Kids group page, and you can follow me on Twitter at Sky Guasco, my name, SkyGuasco, and Bobby LaMarco, aka FFX Factor, on Twitter, and you can find him on Instagram as well. Appreciate you guys. A lot of fun the last 2 shows, a little bit long in the tooth, but always a pleasure. A lot of information. Hope you guys take care of yourself and each other. For our special guest the last 2 nights, Fantasy Football Analyst, aka Joe Volpe, and my man Bobby LaMarco, aka Fantasy Football X Factor. I'm your host, Sky Guasco, and we will catch you next time. We are out of here.